Hello, welcome to Lesson 11, Academic Coaching and Learning Science. Here's the overview of our content. We'll discuss school engagement and burnout, the most critical high-risk environments. We'll talk risk and protective factors, academic coaching, academic resilience, some science of how learning works, and ways that we can coach to enhance academic resilience and building learning skills for our clients. Education and work are highly important pathways to meet our economic needs. Education provides us with the knowledge and skills to earn the financial resources that provide for our basic needs and desires. But our time in school and at our workplace also provide opportunities to meet many of our fundamental psychological needs. If we understand how to tap into and build those things, we're able to meet our natural drive for learning and growth, our need to have purpose, something to work toward, to draw meaning from, to engage with, to build competence, confidence, and work towards self-actualization. School and work provide social outlets that offer resources to meet our sociological needs for relatedness, belonging, connection, friendship, respect, and social support. The sad thing is that our public education systems in the United States and many other places are so focused on results, meeting the numbers, that these opportunities for fostering well-being and positive development are not only missed, but oftentimes even undermined by overemphasis on results in the form of grades or grade point averages, and the need to control so many young people in a single setting. And as a result, our youth are either disengaging or detaching to avoid the overwhelm associated with the higher demand around things they're not even interested in learning, or working so hard to stay on track and excel that they're burning themselves out. And then you have those in between who are fine with just doing enough to pass to keep their stress levels manageable and protect their time and energy for living a balanced life around that. But they're judged harshly by those who believe that they're not performing to their potential or not doing enough. We are here to support them as they learn to tap into the benefits of school and work while establishing boundaries and attending to self-care on the way. And this week's module is focused on the school part. Next week, we'll be focused on the job or career perspective. School engagement is the opposite of burnout and defined as energy, dedication, and absorption toward school. Energy includes vigor and mental resilience. Dedication includes a positive attitude, interest, pride, challenge, and experiencing meaning. And absorption includes a sense of competence and success. Studies show school engagement has been found to predict life satisfaction, academic achievement, academic competence, higher education aspirations, and to reduce delinquency and substance abuse. And most of us have heard of job burnout. Some of us may have even experienced it, but I wonder how many knew that school burnout was a thing. It absolutely makes sense that it is, and many of you may have also experienced this. But school-related burnout is defined by Finnish psychologist Katarina Salmela-Aro and colleagues as involving exhaustion due to school demands, cynicism and detached attitude toward school, and a sense of inadequacy at school. School burnout has been found to predict lower educational aspirations and delayed higher education, depressive symptoms, a 4 times increased likelihood of school dropout, lower school engagement, impaired identity development, and lower life satisfaction. And global studies of school burnout have found average rates of burnout as 14.6%, with students at an average age of about 14 and a half. Preteens 10 to 13 experience lower rates at 4.5%, and older students 17 to 18 experience higher rates at nearly 17%. And here are the 3 branches of contributing factors to school burnout. You have your internal, interpersonal, and environmental factors. The internal include things like the psychological or physiological states and traits of the individual, their health, and skills. Interpersonal includes things like the social interactions, their relationships, connections, experiences of social support. And environmental include things like the external conditions where they're learning, the resources available, demands and expectations of the environment, the culture, values, or norms. And here are some of our risk and protective factors of school burnout. The risk factors include low academic performance, a low level of education, learning difficulties, lacking support from peers with low levels of burnout, parenting approaches that devalue the child or apply high pressure to perform. And the parenting approaches actually have the largest effect size for social support, lacking positive teacher-student relationships. And those are most often found in relationships where the teacher is attempting to control the behavior of the student, dissatisfaction with relationships with peers and or teachers, a negative perception of the school climate, negative perceptions of the future, and academic tracks. And academic tracks are those that are solely focused on the academic work for the sake of the education in itself, whereas on the protective factor side, you have vocational tracks. That's where the education is focused on how this can apply to job or career paths. So on your protective factors list, we have good academic performance, high self-esteem, high self-efficacy, high problem-focused coping efficacy, support from peers with low levels of burnout, emotional support from parents, and that is parents demonstrating interest in the student's academic life and trusting the child to be able to navigate and manage it. And again, that parental support is where we see the largest effect sizes for social support. Positive teacher-student relationships, that is a relationship wherein the teacher is motivating and encouraging toward the student and demonstrating interest in the student. Other protective factors are being satisfied with relationships with peers and or teachers, having positive perceptions of the school climate, positive perceptions of the future, and those vocational tracks. And to refresh our memory on some of the things that we've learned in earlier modules that are relevant as foundational understandings to academic engagement and performance. Number one, remember that all humans have innate tendencies to approach, which is engage, or to avoid, which is disengage, tasks or situations to protect and or conserve our internal resources. We are naturally more open and willing to approach tasks or situations that involve a sense of self-efficacy, so a belief in our ability to handle it, perceived control, sufficient resources, self-chosen goals. Those are the I want to things related to things that we're interested in, we enjoy, or that we value for our own personal reasons. And positive stress, that can do want to stuff or no stress. And we are naturally more likely to avoid tasks or situations that involve low self-efficacy, low perceived control, insufficient resources, externally imposed goals like doing this because I have to, or avoidance goals, doing it because I don't want whatever the consequence would be. And we're also more likely to avoid tasks or situations that involve adaptive stress, which is having to fight or flee, or distress, which is the negative stress where we're experiencing breakdown and burnout. And then some additional refreshers here are that we're just a few years on the other side of the COVID pandemic, which was an experience of collective global trauma. Recall that Gottlieb and colleagues found that the brains of post-COVID adolescents showed advanced brain age, similar to the appearance of brains of those who have experienced extreme adversity. So we're talking the average adolescent has now experienced the biological changes associated with extreme adversity. The next thing to remember is that children with 3 or more adverse childhood experiences are 5 times more likely to have attendance issues at school, 6 times more likely to have behavior problems, and 3 times more likely to experience academic failure. And recall that school belonging has been found to be a prerequisite of academic engagement and achievement. We learned a lot about internal and interpersonal factors in prior lessons. Today, I'm going to expand more on environmental factors because K through 12 education is compulsory in the United States. Students don't get to choose to go to school or not without legal repercussions on their parents. Most also don't get to choose where they go to school or what they're studying. They have very little control over their environment in those K through 12 years. A recent publication by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine shared the 4 most critical high-risk environments for children and youth in the United States. And they were identified as environments where they experience poverty, trauma, discrimination or racism, and high pressure to achieve, which is most often found in affluent communities. And I'm going to spend the next several slides expanding on these for a bit. Remember what we learned about bias. Stereotypes represent beliefs about shared characteristics of group members. Our brains are wired for snap judgments, for efficiency. We are constantly taking in information, making assumptions, and categorizing without our awareness. If we had to consciously process everything, we would not survive. Conscious processing takes way too much time and effort. We need split-second responses for survivability in plenty of scenarios. Many don't realize stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination work together like a chain reaction. Stereotypes are the thoughts. They are the judgment that influences the feeling. Prejudice is the feeling. Prejudice is a negative emotional result of stereotyping. Prejudice houses the attitudes and feelings about stereotyped beliefs. That prejudice then influences behavior. And discrimination is the behavior that results from stereotypes and prejudice. And it may be hard to believe, but stereotypes are not inherently bad. They're actually a pretty functional survival mechanism. We're most familiar with stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination relating to negative outcomes based on race, culture, gender, sexual orientation, and other things like that. But stereotyped expectations could actually save our lives. An example would be if an armed man is running toward me in a dark alley. A stereotyped expectation about people running at us with a weapon would probably lead me to jump to the conclusion that my life is in danger. I may not be in danger. That person running at me with a weapon may not even see me. Maybe it's an off-duty officer running to help someone nearby who's actually in danger. But if someone is running at me with a weapon, I don't have time to question their motives or agenda. I need a split second to react to save my life, just in case I am in danger. So the split second judgment would initiate the immediate negative emotional response to the person running at me with a weapon. That negative emotional response is the prejudice. I am prejudiced against people running toward me with weapons. I do not have a positive attitude or positive feelings about that person. Then the urge to run or fight is a discriminatory behavior. Running or fighting is me discriminating against that person with a weapon. In this case, it might save my life if I was in danger. But even though this can be helpful, like we addressed in earlier lessons when we talked about our default thought patterns, we're most often not in those life or death situations. We cannot always rely on those automatic responses in our daily interactions if we want to contribute to positive change. We have got to learn to recognize them when they're happening and check them for fit. Stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination are pervasive. They are always working in the background. They run through our everyday interactions and contribute to so many of our problems as a society because we're largely unaware that they're working under the surface. And then marginalization is the process by which groups of people are relegated to lower status or outer edges of society. It's an exclusion process that denies communities of people equal access, limiting upward mobility and pushing them into poverty and discrimination. Exclusion from resources, opportunities, and power positions leads marginalized people to remain dependent and subordinate to the more powerful groups. We see this at work in our school to prison pipeline, affecting youth who are already at risk. We see this at work in our criminal justice system with major disparities by race and gender. We see it in organizations, in politics, in every realm of our society. There is a more powerful group contributing to the rise of those like them, even if largely subconsciously. And when members of marginalized groups succeed, it's because they found a way to overcome despite the obstacles, lack of resources, and opportunities. Those marginalized groups experience discrimination in ways that those who are not like them will never understand. And many don't even believe or can't even imagine because it's not their experience. It's not real to those who have never experienced it. The positive takeaway here, though, is that there are ways to help de-bias our world and to empower marginalized groups. And coaching is one way to do that. And that's why we are here. I highly recommend a couple of books to learn so much more on these topics. Blind Spot by social psychologists Mahzarin Banaji, Banaji, and Anthony Greenwald. And the other book is Whistling Vivaldi by social psychologist Claude Steele. And here's a highlight of some of the ways that we can improve outcomes through evidence-based de-biasing techniques. 2 general approaches to de-biasing have been demonstrated effective by research. And one is to educate individuals, that's modifying the decision maker, and offering tools to supplement that education to mitigate biased decision-making. This course is an example of that first option, educating individuals on the existence of these biases, how they impact individuals, offering some familiarity of how they work, and reviewing tools that we can use to mitigate them in a coaching environment. I'm doing all of that by pulling this information from the research, bringing it to you here, talking about it, discussing ways that you can integrate it and use it with your clients. And coaching clients to develop their social and emotional competencies, to become aware of their implicit biases, of the way their default thoughts, feelings, and behaviors contribute to how they are experiencing interactions with others, who they may perceive as different from themselves. We're coaching to promote pro-social interactions and mitigate negative outcomes. Those are also ways to modify the decision maker. For those who are experiencing high-risk environments themselves, are coaching them to identify what is in their power, and to do that is also a way to modify the decision maker. The second is to modify the environment by creating optimal conditions. And this is where adults have responsibility to get involved, to mitigate risk, and promote environments that support safety, belonging, and conditions conducive to learning, growth, and thriving. And now let's explore some of the research on minoritized and marginalized groups in an effort to continue to educate the adult decision maker before we shift into learning science. Racial discrimination is still very real in the United States. And Black youth are consistently negatively affected at rates 2 to 3 times their peers, even compared to other minority peers. The school to prison pipeline is very real. It refers to racial discrimination and exclusionary discipline practices in schools that pushes minorities out of schools and funnels them into contact with the justice system. Black students are consistently expelled and suspended at disproportionately higher rates, more than twice their share than white peers. According to the U.S. Education Department Office for Civil Rights 2017 and 18 data, which is the most recent data, Black students made up 15.1% of the public school student population and 38.8% of the expulsions, while white students made up 47.3% of the population and 33.4% of expulsions. Black students were 31.6% of students arrested at school compared to 34.4% of white students. And just prior to that, the 2011 and 12 data showed Black students made up 16% of the public school student population and 31% of school-related arrests compared to white students with 51% of the student population and 39% of arrests. And once in contact with the justice system, Black youth consistently experience harsher sentencing practices than white peers. According to the Census for Juveniles and Residential Placement, Black youth represented 315 per 100,000 in the population compared to white peers with 72 per 100,000. That is over 3 times the rate of detention as a sentence for Black youth. The achievement and opportunity gaps in our school systems and paths to financial security are also still glaring issues for people of color and those of low socioeconomic status in the U.S. That low SES group happens to also be predominantly made up of people of color. The National Center for Education Statistics, that's been tracking student performance since the 70s in the National Assessment of Education Progress, defines an achievement gap as when one group of students, like students grouped by race or ethnicity or gender, outperforms another group, and the difference in average scores for the two groups is statistically significant. These national scorecards have found Black, Hispanic, and low SES students consistently score lower than white peers in math and reading. The gap has been narrowing since around 2010, but still remains significant. According to the Standard Center for Education Policy Analysis, achievement gaps are strongly correlated with racial gaps in income, poverty rates, unemployment rates, and educational attainment. And then consider how achievement gaps in K through 12 play out into adulthood. Black, Hispanic, and Native American adults experience unemployment at nearly twice the rate of white adults. Black and Hispanic adults experience poverty at 2 to 2.5 times the rate of white adults. And Black and Hispanic adults still earn bachelor's degrees at significantly lower rates than white peers. Minorities also happen to be much more likely to end up in low-wage jobs and remain underrepresented and underpaid in professional level and leadership roles. LGBTQ plus youth also face disproportionately high negative effects related to their sexual or gender orientation. A Trevor Project national survey of 34,000 youth ages 13 to 24 in the US found that 45% of LGBTQ plus youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. According to the CDC's Youth Risk Behavior Survey, of 13,677 respondents in grades 9 through 12 across the US, LGBTQ students experience violent victimization and suicide attempt at significantly greater rates than heterosexual and cisgender peers. The Human Rights Campaign's 2020 analysis of this data found 29% of transgender youth experienced being threatened or injured with a weapon on school property versus 7% of cisgender youth. 43% of transgender youth experienced being bullied on school property versus 18% of cisgender youth. 29% of gay or lesbian youth and 31% of bisexual youth experienced being bullied on school property versus 17% of heterosexual youth. 29% of transgender youth had attempted suicide versus 7% of cisgender youth. And 21% of gay or lesbian and 22% of bisexual youth had attempted suicide versus 7% of straight youth. It's also worth noting that the Trevor Project's report found LGBTQ youth who felt high social support from their family reported attempting suicide at less than half the rate of those who felt low or moderate social support. In the 2020 to 2021 school year, 15% of all public school students received special education services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act in the US. This includes learning disabilities, speech or language impairment, other health impairment, autism, developmental delay, intellectual disability, emotional disturbance, multiple disabilities, and hearing impairment. American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Black students represented the highest percentage of students receiving services, with Pacific Islander and Asian students representing the lowest. Rates were 14% for Hispanic students and 15% for white students. Students with disabilities graduate at a significantly lower rate than those without disabilities, are disproportionately involved in bullying, victimization, and perpetration, and those with anxiety, depression, or developmental delay experience higher prevalence of bullying victimization. And these statistics may come as a shock to some, but yes, high pressure to achieve has been deemed a high-risk environment for children and youth. Studies in the last decade have identified children and families in affluent communities experience high levels of chronic negative stress related to high pressure to achieve in school and extracurricular activities. Studies of students in high-achieving schools consistently demonstrate high levels of adjustment problems, including clinically significant depression and anxiety, rule breaking, and substance misuse at much higher rates than national norms, even higher than those in urban poverty. They also show highest levels of substance misuse and lower self-concept and more negative emotions. And a side note is that these studies have assessed the effects on family and found that mothers of students in high-achieving schools tend to experience highest levels of negative stress among family members, as they are typically more responsible for participation and involvement in extracurriculars and supporting their kids' performance around their own high-stress work lives.